Start. So
Yeah, no, definitely start now. Yeah.
my name is
Let's
Alex
see.
Stepanian. I am a quality architect for Strategic Enablers program. We are building a support structure around a homegrown test automation framework. As of 6 days ago, it's called OpenTest. What OpenTest is, it's a keyword-driven, data-driven framework for test automation. On my screen, you should see, on your screens, you should rather see that OpenTest uses Appium and Selenium for things that Appium and Selenium do the best, which Appium is test automation for mobile devices and Selenium is for web applications. Also, OpenTest has some custom methods implemented in Java. This is what's indicated by the orange box called JRE. This is Java Runtime Engine. That allow us to do test automation with it and do custom UI automation for NP6. It's actually NP6, NP Sharp, and Kiosk. The whole premise is that it doesn't have to be too complicated to create tests. We would like to make tests or create tests that span across multiple applications within McDonald's infrastructure without leaving the same testing tool. We would also like to be able to orchestrate execution. One of the typical scenarios that where the OpenTest idea was born from is a customer orders something on mobile devices, then goes to a store to pick up an order, so we need to go into the NP6, and then customer returns to JMA for follow-up offers or to close the order. So this flow requires some kind of orchestration between different pieces. And when we start talking about setup, I will show you the setup on my laptop. I do not have a mobile device connected, and I do not have an NP6 image installed. So I'll show you API testing and web testing with OpenTest.
And that's the key thing for what we're looking for.
Right. This is why I didn't bother to do more complicated setup, and it's we'll try to cover as much as we can within an hour, but I want to go slow to get you the basics and leave time to answer any of the questions that you might have. So idea is that while Appium is great for mobile testing, we cannot modify it to test API. We probably could, but it's not what it's built for. So what OpenTest does architecturally, and I'll jump straight into the picture that is somehow is missing from that one. There is a sync server on this slide that you should see on your screen on the left upper corner box where it says sync server node.js. This is the server that orchestrates execution of tests across different agents. They are called actors within the framework. So while sync server is Node.js application, it's a simple web server. You'll just see I'm running it locally on my laptop as we speak. All it does, it reads the tests repository and identifies what actor can play a specific test. I'll go through the process of how it looks like, how it runs and all that, but I just want to let you know that the server itself doesn't run any tests. It orchestrates its execution across multiple actors. If one test spans across multiple technologies, say it starts as an API test, then goes to mobile, then to web. So it's the responsibility of a sync server to orchestrate that execution and maintain continuity, because you can pass information from one step to another and all that. So server does it. Actors are Java-based plugins. It's actually a single plugin, but you can configure it to play different roles that provide that level of abstraction to Appium, Selenium, underlying custom Java methods to do testing activities. Are you still with me?
Yes.
Any questions so far?
Yeah.
We are.
So, just to finish with the overall technology stack, tests themselves are YAML files. Look, these are text files with indentation. It's easy to manage, easy to version control, and that's exactly what we do within SC program. We keep it in, I'm guilty, I'm keeping it in GitLab, but the standard is Enterprise Stash repository. What I'm going to do, I'm going to dive right straight into the API test and talk through a few things that I want to show you. So, you know what? Not on this. So my test devs SE, this is a small snapshot of tests that we've created. Data, macros, and tests are hard-coded values where you keep your tests, macros, and data files. So from the get-go, we separate data, logic, and that includes user input and object properties if we need any. For Selenium, it is significant, not so much for API testing. And macros, if we get to that point, I'll talk about macros in more detail, but for now you can think of them as a reusable piece of test that we would like to reuse across multiple tests, such as login. So I'll start with the API test. This is how a test looks like, and I will. This is a single call. It goes straight from the service definition. We don't have to have this service deployed to create it. This test was created from service definition page, while service had not been developed and deployed yet. This MuleSoft implementation for DCS within Strategic Enablers program. So there is a header that says format, description. Description is just a free text that shows up in the report. Tags, will cover it later. Actors. So there's only one actor that this test uses. It's API, which is explainable. And there's only one step. Within that step, we have actions. And there's only one action. If I collapse this plus sign, there's only one, right? And there's description. Again, free text. It's basically a comment. You can treat it as a comment. It's for reporting purposes. Then we have an action, and this is what's happening. This is what does the actual testing action. So dtest actions, HTTP request. The name of the package now is different. I think it's org OpenTest actions HTTP request. But it's backward compatible. I hope it'll work. I just installed the latest version. We'll see how this plays out. But basically, this is an action, and this action takes some arguments, and these are just this typical REST API arguments. We have URL, we have verb for post, we have headers. The headers were copy-pasted. And then within the body, I just copy-pasted JSON file. Is it readable so far? Do you understand what I'm going through?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I can. Can some variables used, for example, for market ID, or do we have to make separate test cases for each market? For example, if I want to test the UK market, can I use it?
Yeah, there are two things. You can create a local variable if you like to, but for testing different markets, the better approach is to parameterize things that need to be parameterized, and I'll show you the example of this call that is fully parameterized. And then you can feed it different data sheets. You can keep your sheet for UK market, you can feed your sheet for US market, depending on testing, or you can even data drive it through multiple tables to test all the markets in one shot, in running the same test multiple iterations. So this, yeah, so I just wanted to go a little bit slow because this demonstrates a thing that we uncovered, and that's now I'd like to go into the execution. As I mentioned before, I need my web server. I am running it locally. This is the command to run it. It's documented. When you should have no problem getting it running. It takes about 10 minutes. So I just installed it, nothing on the server right now. What I plan to do, I plan to run my test that's called identity logout. So to do so, I do create test session. This is my ECP demo. There's some visual artifact. It may or may not happen on your desktop, but it happens on mine. I'm looking for logout demo, just logout. So I'm picking the test that I'm going to run. Now it says pending, and it says that it's acquiring actors. So this is my test suite that I plan to run. It only contains one test, but it's pending because there are no actors. I have to run an actor that can execute the API call. To do so, I go back to my OpenTest folder. There is actor. This is a small Java program. First thing that I do, I have to make sure that I tell that this is my API actor. There is some configuration for web, it will be ignored in this case. And then I just run it. Not just, sorry, I've made some. Oh, and it actually picked up the test. It says completed, everything's fine. If I refresh it, says passed. So there's log. This log can also be viewed on the server as well. So everything's fine, picture perfect and all that. One thing that I missed, and that's important, one of the things that needs to be changed as well is where my server is. So right now I run everything locally. I didn't have to change the file. In your real testing, when you run the test suite, you'll probably be using a server. Right now within SE program, we use a sync server that is deployed as part of the Jenkins infrastructure, and tests are being kicked off from the CI pipeline over REST API call as part of the every build test. So everything looks fine. The problem is, I'm being an experienced tester. I can tell that something went wrong because it says HTTP request returns status code 503. This is not a success code, so something was wrong with my test, with my call, not my test. But since the test that I showed you did nothing, it only fired the request and didn't check the response, I didn't catch it. So there is another version of the same test. The only difference is there's an added line in there that says success status code. This is a specific keyword that identifies what my success code is. If I run it, it'll fail, but I'm not going to, just for the sake of time. What I will show you is the fully developed, fully parameterized test that had been created from initial test. So this is where we started. This is plain copy-paste. The same thing is developed as the fully qualified test. So what has happened is we were running the test, we got that 503 error, and then just looking at the call, this is the call to log out the session, and within the body, within the JSON file, we need to pass the refresh token. So it turned out that error 503 was telling us that this refresh token, this session, does not exist. So we had to log in first, and only then we can disconnect. This led to some modifications to the original test. Right now it has more than one step, and it goes, so this is the parameterized version of it that does some additional things and also validates things at the end. So it's not just fire and forget operation anymore. So first it does login, and the complexity of it is hidden from the user, but login is yet another test that been recorded or created as a macro and stored in macros folder. I will show it to you later. It's under macros subfolder on the left hand side. Then there is, this is the call that we are making that was in the original test. Right now everything is parameterized. There is no hard-coded data here at all. Everything comes from data file. When you see $data sign, it basically means go to the data folder and get my data from there. I'll show you these data files, how they look like, where they're located. But now everything is parameterized. All the tests that makes calls to the DCS services will use the same data sheet for headers, for the URLs. You see that the URL we have base URL, and then we add API test, and we add account logout at the end to it. So the base URL is common, and different tests call different microservices on this service. So if we need to change headers, we can just change the data file in there or point it to a different data sheet, right? Other thing is that, remember I told you that refresh token has to be current. We have to have a current session. So in this case, this is a great example. Refresh token, now it's a variable that comes from DCS call login. So it's you can think of it as a local variable that is valid within the scope of a test. I'll show you the macro where it captures the refresh token, and here we just reuse it, whatever we received in the first call. And here's the another macro that says validate JSON. We pass multiple parameters. We basically expect the success code, success message, the return code should match the success, and if anything goes wrong, we just return the error message. And after that, we write to the log some additional custom information besides just the execution status. This is how test looks like now. And this is a real example from SE program microservices testing API. So all these wonderful things there mask some complexity from it. So I'll go look at the macro for JSON validation. So it's macro. I expand my macros folder. API validate JSON. So under API there is validate JSON YAML file. And if you are familiar with JavaScript, this is JavaScript. So while I told you that all the tests are all text files, it's true to an extent. We can plug script snippets of JavaScript within our tests, and this macro is completely written in JavaScript because there's too much business logic in there. It's not a sequential execution of steps. I'm not going to go through this, but it basically validates different parts of a return JSON. Going back to the script, here's the macro call to do DCS call login. So this is a little bit simpler thing. It's a macro under API, so it's the same subfolder, DCS call login. So it's in a nutshell, it's just a simple call to the login URL, very similar to the logout, also parameterized, but it's been stored. First of all, it had been stored in macros folder. That's how framework identifies its reusable macro piece. And second, here's the line that captures a refresh token as a variable. And script indicates this is my JavaScript snippet. Again, for some things that the text file cannot do for you, like business logic, if then else conditions, conditional execution of things, you can just embed your scripts in there. Are you still following? Any questions so far?
I'm still here.
So I had seen different frameworks across McDonald's landscape, and this one's different from what I had seen. It's very close to TAC in terms of there is execution server and agents that run the test. A lot of other frameworks, especially the ones that were developed on top of Eggplant, I've seen two. They're mostly Excel based, and they don't have that discrimination between server and an actor, to the best of my knowledge. So basically your test just runs on a single hardware point. The reason why test cases and everything is text files is that we plan to version control it. We plan to overlay tests with market data. So right now this test has nothing, it doesn't tell us which market it is. It'll run as long as we have our data sheet in somewhere. And by somewhere I mean it's in data folder under API testing subfolder, and file is called API data. So if I go there, data, API testing, API data, this is how my data file looks like. Again, this is a YAML file that just has some parameters stored in there. Different URLs, different headers there. So the request headers are all. This is the section for request headers that we're using. They even parameterize the created parameter for refresh token, even if it doesn't make sense. But so what it allows us, this separation, keeping it in all different files, what it allows us to do, and we work in this framework, is when testers create their data, their YAML file for the test, they also create YAML file with the parameters. These parameters may not even have values because we either don't know what data is valid. When we get to web testing, you'll see that there's more that we need to know about the application. For those that familiar with Selenium, you know you need object locators that come straight from the application. But the logic doesn't change regardless of whether you run, regardless of your inputs. Sometimes it does, but most of the time it's not. So our logic can be this format, this flow can be created without even knowing what all the correct parameters are, and then we go back and populate them. In terms of API testing, it's a little bit easier. When we get to the web UI, there are two significant pieces that need to be fed into the script. One is test data. What data is valid? User ID, password, user inputs. We work closely with test data management team. While test team or quality automation engineer creates these tests, they give YAML files with parameters to test data management team. And test data management team, their responsibility is to populate data for the CI environment. They also make sure that this data populated into the YAML sheet. So by the time we get to the point of execution, we know that our data is valid for the test within the environment. We know that data exists. We don't have to forage for it. I'll go into web testing.
Were there any other questions from, I'm assuming it'll probably come from Lauren's team on any of the API testing before we go to the web?
Yes, we have, John.
And I think now's a good time.
Okay, good.
One of my questions would be, at the test case, I saw that at the test case, we put the JSON as well in the test case. And my question would be, can we read those JSONs from a file, from an external file, or should be hard-coded into the test case?
We can. I think I even have had the same question from Sapient guys offshore, and I think I even posted a small snippet with the answer.
I think I mentioned this to Adrian as well, that this would be something we'd want to be able to do.
This is Adrian. Hi, guys.
Oh, hi, Adrian. Good morning.
Yeah, you can put your JSON file in an external data file. Actually, any JSON data is also valid YAML data. So from our perspective, you can put your JSON in a YAML file, and then you can load that JSON data using the $data syntax that you saw earlier, demonstrated by Alex. And once you load that data, you basically get a JavaScript object that is being constructed from that JSON data, which you can also alter in any way you want before using it.
So on my screen, I'm not sure if you're on link, Adrian, but your answer that you gave me, I documented for Sapient team. And I hope that you guys can see it on the right-hand side. There is an example of script that reads JSON file from the external YAML file. And that JSON, and then it modifies days generated. It just assigns it the current timestamp.
Maybe highlight the snippet, Alex.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, this I don't have an example of this JSON data YAML file, but you can use your JSON file. It's again, JSON format is valid for YAML files, so you don't have to convert it to YAML.
Okay. Another question would be, does this tool was used for a high number of test cases, like, I don't know, 500 test cases? I'm asking this because now we are using SoapUI, and when we run our test cases, they run for a long, so they take quite a long time to finish the running in one hand. In the other hand, a couple of times the tool crashes, so because of memory problems and so on. So can this tool handle a large number of test cases?
So USIT is using it for GMA testing, and they run a large number of test cases. I think their number is in hundreds. It's between 200 and 300 tests. The mobile testing is a little bit different because they test against the devices. They don't run on the same machine over and over again. They use different devices, either connected locally to the laptops from where they run it, or they're using AWS cloud devices. And I know that they had problems with executing a large number of tests, but recently they said the stability of the solution improved, and they don't really report it as an issue anymore. And within the scope of SC program, we run, I would say, close to 50 tests for each and every build of API tests. They're singular because within CI pipeline we test just a single microservice. It's a single. Most of the times it's just the 1 or 2 calls and validation of response. These 50 tests take 3 to 4 minutes to execute.
Does this answer your question, Marcos? In terms of numbers?
One more question, if I can, regarding this.
Sure, that's what we're here for.
If we receive a test suite containing 100 test cases, for example, do I need to manually tag each one of them that they are in the suite we run, or is there a way to, for example, a script says that these 100 should be run, and or is there only a manual way? I don't know if
You're breaking up a little bit. I'll try to repeat your question. Please correct me if I'm getting it wrong. The question was, how do we run just the tests that we wanted, not one by one, not everything? Is this what you're looking for?
not on everything and not one by one. So,
right.
So usually we get an execution plan. Let's say we have 500 tests and somebody makes a plan from it, and from those 500 tests we have to run like for example 100, and
specifically testing those features that were changed.
Yeah, and we have to tag manually each test case so that you can run only those 100 test cases out of 500, or we can use a script, or there is a script which can be easily used for this purpose.
Yeah, so when I'm looking if I have an example of it, I'm not sure if I do. Just give me a second. No, I don't think so. I had it somewhere, but not here. So the short answer, yes, you can. So when you go through the web interface, you handpick what you'd like to run, and you add to your session. I picked a single test. I could have picked more than that, but that's manual, so I can just check whatever I want to. With large number of tests, it doesn't really work well, and it doesn't work for automated execution when we need to run it. How it works is that within CI pipeline, when we initiate the execution, we initiate it over a REST API call. That REST API call tells us, refers to a file. It's also a YAML file with the list of tests to be executed. They are called templates. There is create session from template menu on the web UI, but it doesn't really work, but it works over API call. So my testers, they have 3 or 4 templates. One is the full, one is a middleware template, which only runs tests that test middleware microservices. There's one for DCS, and I think that there are a few variations of login tests, because we have different login APIs for traditional login and social login using Facebook, for example. So the short answer, yes, it's possible. The longer answer is, if you do it manually through the web UI, you have to hand pick what you run, what you plan to run. And if you do it over REST API, and it doesn't have to be automated from Jenkins, we actually when we cheat, we use Postman to just run the REST API command to OpenTest to execute the suite.
Oh, thank you.
Can I try to describe it in a slightly different way? So
sure.
These template files that Alex is talking about, they're basically lists of tests that you want to run. So you put your tests in that YAML file in the exact order that you want them to be run in, and then you save this YAML file in the same place where you have your tests in a directory called templates. So now you can reuse this template file over and over again whenever you need to run that same suite of tests. The only downside, as Alex was explaining, is that you cannot do this from the user interface currently. However, the Sync server accepts a very rich API that basically allows you to do pretty much anything. And one of the things this API allows you to do is to start a test session based on a template file, right? So you simply have to make a REST API call to the Sync server, and then your test session starts from that template file. And you can make this call either from Postman, or you can make it from tools like curl or wget, so you can make them from the command line. You can save them in a batch file or do whatever, right?
So one of the pieces of documentation on the web page is how to integrate in CI pipeline, and it shows some of the examples. The first code snippet is the snippet of a YAML file that tells a server to run just two tests, smoke test 1 and smoke test 2. And the second snippet is actually the REST API call parameters to make server run this template, basically go through these two tests. And there is an example of using curl to do this. So again, we say as part of the SE program, we have few templates. Like we don't have smoke tests, but we have middleware tests, we have DCS tests, and I think social registration tests are separate from others because they require some third-party integration, which is not always available. Sometimes we don't want to run them as part of the full suite. Does it answer question that you were asking? I think it was something positive, right? Okay. Any other questions?
Everything besides speaking manually is rather fun.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I said that everything besides speaking manually, each test is relevant stuff.
I think what we'll need to do is come up with an enhancement or something that allows us to keyword the test cases or something so we have an easier selection, because once we get up to 1,000 test cases, they're right, we will need to have a better way of selecting. We can't go into each test and make a list.
So if I go and do something like web, interactively, you can do this. From the API, it still needs a list of tests. Enhancement request. Yeah, I mean, we own the framework, at least for now. I just off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm not sure how to implement the keywords in there, but
or some way to, yeah. I think we'll take it offline. I'll make a note.
Yeah, but there are a couple of ways to do this. So depending on what you want to do. So let's say you have 1,000 tests and you want to run 500 of them. If you know that you're going to be running those 500 daily, for example, then it makes sense to create a template file to describe those tests. And then you can start a test session every day using just that command line that Alex was showing earlier to start a session using a template, right? That's one thing. The other thing you can do is if you want to run a set of tests, but this can vary, it's not the same set of tests every time. Actually, even right now in the UI, there's a few features that you can that can help with that. So Alex, can you please go to the web UI a little bit? So what you can do is you can create a new test session. Yeah, use the create test session and remove the filter. Yeah. So what you can do is you can click. So if you want to select 100 actions, for example, from this list, what you can do is you can select the first one that you want to include. You just select one, whatever. And now with the Shift key pressed, you can select the last one that you want to include. Press the Shift key and select the last. Okay, because
I scrolled down a few screens and clicked on Shift. Yeah, it's kind of these artifacts. I don't know what it is.
I still cannot see. Did the test select? Yeah, this is a bug in Chrome actually. If you use any other browser, it will not show up, and I hope they fix it soon. But basically, see, using the Shift key, you can select a range of tests you want to run.
It's the same as selecting multiple rows in Excel, for example. Right?
Yeah.
You can use Control or Shift.
Again, you would only do this if your set of tests that you want to run is going to be different every time. Then it doesn't make sense to create template files for those one-time sessions.
I think the question comes from idea that team will create hundreds of tests, and every time they add new tests to the mix, they would have to go in and update few template files. So the question was, is it possible to automate it somehow? And I think
the answer is no, because someone has to decide what tests goes into what test suite, right? There's no way to automate it. What we can do is we can add some features in this dialog box that will let you select tests based on tags that you assign to the test, right?
Right. As long as we can set tags and select from there. I mean, we realize that we'll have to initially set this up manually every time we add tests. You have to add them to a certain list. But then going back to be able to say, I want to pick all the tests I ran on 3.4 and run them again.
Yeah.
These are my core tests. I need to run them every time.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I just put a note in the notes to get some examples and a little more detail offline. That way you can move on and give us a quick view of the web UI stuff.
so. With web UI, if you are familiar with Selenium, this is what it is. What I just did, I went back to my actor. I killed the session that was representing the API testing actor. I modified and said, right now I want to run actor as a web actor. There are some things that need to be set up. I do have my Selenium Chrome driver in there for testing. So I just went to Selenium website and downloaded some executables. So these drivers usually come from the browser vendor. They're not part of Selenium itself. You don't need to install Selenium separate from OpenTest. It's built in. But the browser drivers, all of them you need to download. So from like latest Selenium version does not have built-in driver for Firefox, for example, anymore. You have to download it separately. So this is my file for the actor. This is an example of a web test. And this is, if you are familiar with Selenium, it's basically different format of calling the same thing. This says send keys. This is a Selenium command to type something in. Takes two parameters: what element we typed it into, and this is parameterized. It comes from the locators sheet for a login name parameter. I'll show you how the file looks like, and what to type in. So this is not fully developed script. The user input data is not parameterized. It only parameterizes locators. But I took what I had as an example. We did it for RFM team as a proof of concept. It actually goes to their website and does something on it. So if I look at the web locators data file under data web locators YAML. So this one gives you captures locators by ID. Some of them are XPath. The idea was that locator 1 would use IDs for fields, and locators 1 would use XPath explicitly, but because of the issues with the web page source code, we couldn't maintain this framework. But majority is that, so the second file uses XPaths more, and the first one more of an ID. For whoever's familiar with Selenium, that's the concept it works on, right? It doesn't work at the specific position on screen. What it does, it reads the HTML source code, finds out where the element we're looking for, and this locator actually tells what the element is. So for the login, it's the field with ID username regular. Yeah, and there is no XPath somehow. It's captured even in the second file. So I can run it. I'm not sure if you want me to. I need to go to OpenTest, to actor, and need to run it. So right now I have my actor of type web available, so I can run my test. And I'm not sure if this one will work, because it had been created a few weeks ago, and it started to fail at some point of time. But since this is not a real test, this is just a demo to show how it initiates the test and goes through. So this actual execution you see on screen, it started copy of Chrome browser and drives the execution through. Okay. It did fail. Yeah, apparently pricing tab is no longer there. But the changes come to the web page. I don't even want to troubleshoot it. So we have just over 5 minutes until the end of this call. I covered some things. Some answers you can find within the documentation page. I plan to convert the page with Sapient request, the one where I showed you the JSON example, into FAQ document and add any more questions there. So you can contact me directly with questions. I'll try to get you answers. In the meantime, not in the meantime, eventually I will, if they are something that I can document on FAQ page, they'll probably go in there for future use. We're still working on documentation, so there's no complete set of documentation yet, but a lot of technical knowledge is under the link that I sent you earlier. There is data-driven capability built in right now, so you can iterate your test case through multiple sets of data. I don't have an example, and I don't have time to show it, so you can read up on that. It's documented, where I can get you some real-life examples if you need to. What else? Adrian, did I miss any other major feature that I should have been talking about?
Well, there are a lot of things to talk about, right? And it's not possible to cover them in 1 hour. But what we can do is we can make available the videos that I captured with the RFM team, and while they are not exactly not particularly well structured, they do go through the features that through the core features. So those are going to do much. I think it's going to give everybody a much better view on what's available and what can be done. Because I think, I mean, we didn't cover. I'm sure many people that did not work with YAML in the past are even wondering what was this YAML thing. Then again, a lot of little things that you need to know to get comfortable with the concepts. So Yeah, maybe just send the link to this page
So
to everybody.
I sent the link to Framework Functional Automation. Under that, there is OpenTest training videos. So there are 3 videos available there on YouTube. So if you feel like it, feel free to go and run them.
Just one quick question from Thomas' side.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. If there's some kind of reports behind this, I know there's a graphical thing in the UI, but there is something in the background, I guess, to be used by our automation frameworks. So.
Are you talking about starting the execution?
The reports of the execution.
Oh, reports from the execution? So every execution has session ID. It's URL encoded, so when you do it automatically, you get this session ID back, and then you can go to the URL to view results. What we do as part of the CI pipeline in SE program, Strategic Enablers, is that these results returned back to the request as a JSON file. So a Jenkins job that kicks out the execution, waits until it completes, and displays completed pass or fail status within Jenkins pipeline, and provides the URL to go and URL to this exact page for each session. So here I can tell.
You're not sharing anymore.
Yeah, that's what
I'm
happens.
putting in the
once
notes that we need some examples for the reporting, and
Yeah, that could be
follow
okay, because we are running out of time, I guess. So, if you could share us some sample images of some fake executions, that could be a way, and also some links and the videos that you mentioned before, just for the team, just like using it as a crash course. Okay, you are back, Alex.
Yeah, just thank you for reminding me. So the page with videos is under the link that I sent you in the chat window. I can resend it as reply all email.
I've
There
got
are
it
3
in the notes.
videos.
It's in the notes.
Yeah, so the test results, when you run it, you get your session ID. So
I
it's
think what
URL
we're looking
encoded.
for is not knowing individual, but is there a way to say if we run 500 tests, how many passed, how many failed, which ones failed?
We are thinking about that.
Yeah, so you will see something. So you will see list of tests with their results. Each one is expandable. You will see which exact step failed. Right now, I only ran one as part of the suite. That's why you get kind of bare execution results. These are the action descriptions from your YAML files. So you can find out exactly where it failed. Log file provides you more detailed information. I'm fairly sure that it couldn't find. It was supposed to click on the pricing tab, and the pricing tab was not there. So it's execution. This is the pricing tab. Click on pricing tab. Caused by. Element is not clickable, so it's disabled in the UI. This is what I can tell. I don't know why it's problem with.
I think this would be equivalent to what we get out of the web report, Loren. The list of tests and the ability to see what the error was.
So with reporting is this captures step execution, basically very simple information about each step or each action within the script. You get the log file from the Java agent. That's a standard Java dump. There is no reporting per se built into the server yet. For the purpose of strategic enablers, we don't require it as an enhancement because our reporting is done through the Jenkins dashboard. And if anything fails, then it's a manual effort to troubleshoot the log files anyway. So it doesn't really.
Right. Okay, so we can just point out via the Jenkins, I guess, right?
Right.
Okay.
At least that's what we do within strategic enablers. Other teams say traditional QMS services, just testing services, they probably need more reporting out of it. because they don't run it through Jenkins. They do a lot of manual kickouts, and they run much larger set of test cases. And for strategic enablers is development CI environment, more of a component service testing, some integration. What it means is that our tests majorly pass. If we get a failure, it's an exception. For QMS services, not so. So they do have a request outstanding to implement some kind of reporting, better reporting. And when you start looking at it, you want singular execution, you want to status over time, you want summaries and all that. My gut answer to this is we don't have to implement it within OpenTest. We just need to be able to get these results into a standard reporting dashboard somehow. It had not been implemented yet. There is no standard dashboard for McDonald's. For SE program, we use Jenkins as one.
Yeah, so there's the Java API that's exposed by the sync server gives you all of the detailed information about the test execution. And Alex, if you can insert just on the left of session in the address bar, if you can insert the word API / and do an enter. Yeah, so this is JSON data that is getting returned from the sync server and contains everything you need to know about that test execution. I mean, you can take it and format it nicely in some text editor and look at it. Yeah, this is just about everything
this is the data that is being returned to Jenkins when Jenkins runs REST API call to start execution. And this is what they parse and reflect in Jenkins dashboard.
Okay, I'm going to try to wrap this up now.
Yep.
I don't know who has next meetings, but what I think we'll do is let this digest, and then maybe, Loren, your team can suggest an agenda for a follow-up meeting based on questions and some deeper dive into areas you want to see a little more of.
Definitely. Plus,
yeah.
We are welcoming any material that you have about this, just to chew it, and after that we are going to have a meeting about that. Okay?
Yep. And I would like to. I'm open to answer any of the questions, but I would like them to be consolidated. If you could send them to John, I guess.
Yeah, in advance, Alex. We are going to send it.
I heard some requests for samples, so this is something I can get you in the meantime. We don't have to wait for the next meeting. But if you have requests for samples or any other things, I would just prefer it to be funneled through John. Just get a single email instead of piecemealing the information and reply to the whole team.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. I'll put in there to send me any questions, and I'll together.
Okay, then thank you so much for your time. I hope it answered some of your questions.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.